We have another story on Tomi Lahren. So, Tomi Lahren was first suspended by Beck, who is the owner of The Blaze, a superbly far-right wing news organization, whatever, news show. She got suspended because she essentially called conservatives who are pro-life hypocrites. So that's interesting. And then she basically got fired. So what she's doing now is she's suing for wrongful termination against Beck. And she just recently did an interview. And I'm going to break down the wrongful termination thing in a second. But this is what it says. It says, Tomi Lahren speaks out after suspension from The Blaze. Quote, "I was flabbergasted." Oh, the opportunist finally gets fired because you can't find a principled position up your asshole with all that money and all those Instagram followers and all those Twitter followers and all those Facebook followers? Okay, anyways, here is what Variety says. They say, quote, "Conservative commentator Tomi Lahren is suing her former boss Beck and his online platform The Blaze for alleged wrongful termination. Lahren, who has garnered a large online following for her unapologetic attitude on her show, Tomi, filed a wrongful termination lawsuit in Texas on Friday, claiming she was suspended from her program after publicly revealing that she was in favor of abortion rights. During an interview on ABC's The View last month, the 24-year-old announced that she was pro-choice, and you guys know about all that shit. But she went on to basically talk about it. This is what they said. This is where it gets important, okay? It says, quote, "This was not about politics," Lahren said. "This was about someone who had an opposing viewpoint that has been silenced and sidelined and thrown away." Lahren is also requesting for the immediate return of her social media accounts, which are currently operated by The Blaze. In her lawsuit against The Blaze, Lahren says that, quote, "Expressing her First Amendment rights and her personal opinions about a woman's right to choose is not grounds for termination." Lahren says that Beck, quote, "embarked on a public smear campaign that attempted to embarrass, humiliate, and undermine." The Blaze denied the claim, saying in a statement that, quote, "It is puzzling that an employee who remains under contract and is still being paid, shockingly, has sued us for being fired, especially when we continue to comply fully with the terms of our agreement with her." Quote, "When your outlet is taken away from you, and you don't understand why, and you are so disappointed, and you are so blindsided by it, it hurts." Okay. First of all, let's get into the whole wrongful termination thing, okay? I do believe in wrongful termination. I think that should be something that is a protection for workers. And I'll give you guys an example of one that will pretty much back you into a corner in which you won't have another response. But Republicans and libertarians don't believe that, because wrongful termination is inherently against the free market. It's a government regulation. They are not for that. Conservatives who claim to be for small government and libertarians who hate government would not be for that, because wrongful termination is, again, a governmental protection. There's no private sector rule that within the private sector there's some kind of wrongful termination in there. Republicans and conservatives conservatives and libertarians, which is what she claims to be, do not have any wrongful termination. They feel that the owner or the business owner has the ability to just fire for any reason, which makes sense. It's their business, right? But I think that when you break it down under certain cases, there definitely need to be workers' protection. So I'll give you an example, and that I learned about this through the Neil Gorsuch hearings, but it was this. So it was the case of a man who had left his post because he was in a truck, it was freezing, and if he had stayed there, which is what the employer told him to do, he literally would have died. He would be dead today. He would no longer be breathing. He would no longer be on this planet. He would be in a grave or cremated. Okay? So he decides to leave because he's like, hey, I'm going to die. Like, this is literally life-threatening, right? But because they told him not to leave, they fired him. Is that fair? You do something that saves your life and you get fired for it. I think that that is absolutely absurd, and I think that there should be a workers' protection for that. So I think that wrongful termination does need to exist. But you didn't believe in that until now. So you're faking, and you don't deserve it because you didn't fight for it. I believe in it, but you don't. You're just an opportunist. And the second part about First Amendment this, First Amendment that. Nobody is prosecuting you for saying what you're saying. Like this idea that somehow a business taking someone who they pay money to, they hire voluntarily off of their show because of their First Amendment rights. The only thing that violates the First Amendment, keep in mind, is anything that incites violence. So if I went on, let's say, CNN, and I said, black people should all be called N-words, right? Should they be able to fire me? Because that's still within my First Amendment rights. You can still say that, because that's not going to incite violence. The only thing it is, it's hate speech, but hate speech is free speech. So that doesn't violate my First Amendment rights. But what CNN should be able to do is fire me, because you can't just have any type of saying whatever you want on someone else's platform, and that's what people don't seem to understand, right? So although in principle you would say, like, for example, I would take the position of, hey, on Twitter you shouldn't be suspended if you're whatever, Sargon Avocado or whatever, they have the right to do whatever the fuck they want. It's their platform, right? But this is the same case, but this is massively emboldened. Just put yourself in CNN's position. Again, that example that I just gave you, that hypothetical, right? Which is what libertarians love. Hypothetical is their dream, literal wet dream. But, you know, put yourself in that situation, because almost nothing actually violates the First Amendment except for incitations of violence. So that is a good way to think about it. So Tomi Lahren, you're just wrong. You're not going to win. There's no protections of that in Texas, to my knowledge. I have read that it's not. I hope that there's not. I hope you get fired, because you are a toxic human. What's up, guys? It's Saul Hill here. You guys are watching The Progressive Voice. Make sure you guys click subscribe down below. We're fighting Donald Trump tooth and nail, and we need your help.